Hello, Cherries fans. Welcome back to another edition of Sparky's Stats. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the centre backs that we've been linked with over this pre-season, delving a little bit into some of the stats and maybe picking out a recommendation or two as to who we might look to bring in based on what they've been like defensively and on the ball. Now, before we go any further, do want to just let you know that this video is sponsored by Aquashine Exteriors, professional exterior cleaning services across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. Please do look in the description below for their website, also their social media, and there is a phone line there to call to get a free quotation. So thank you very much for sponsoring this video. Now, who have we been linked with this pre-season? These are the main four that I think a lot of people are more familiar with. We've got Sepp van den Berg in the top left on loan at Preston from Liverpool, Axel Tuanzebe in the top right at United, Courtney House in the bottom right at Villa, and obviously we're all familiar with that Phillips in the bottom left on loan from Liverpool last season. So I'm going to throw quite a bit at you in terms of stats on the screen, but I want to pick out nothing too groundbreaking, who looks like they've been the most successful in terms of their defensive ability, probably picking out more their aerial ability for the central centre back, and then sort of how good are they in terms of their interceptions and ground duels just in general. And then we'll also look at their passing stats. And I think a particular focus I would put on our long passing, as I think that's something that Parker will want to see more often from his centre backs this season. So first and foremost, we've got our defensive stats. So what I've brought up here, two things. I'm showing you Lloyd Kelly as a decent comparison. I think most people would agree he's our best centre-back currently on the books out of the three that we've got. Sepp van den Berg was the only one of these guys to play in a back three regularly last season. He was Preston's right centre-back, and as you can see, he started the vast majority of their games. So he has a more familiarity with the system that Parker looks like he's going to be putting into practice. And then the last thing is I'm comparing Tuanzebe and House's 2018-19 championship seasons at Villa for two reasons. Firstly, they haven't really played that much since, so that is a negative to put on. Courtney House has played, I think, made 17 starts for Villa in the two Premier League seasons, and Axel hasn't really played for Villa, and he was on loan at Napoli last season, played 2 games, I think, didn't get very much action. It also allows us to make a comparison fully across championship seasons, so it's a much more even comparison between the 5 players. Now, Squawker's site here, the simplest thing to look at is if it was green, they were the best at it. There is a slight difference there in terms of fouls conceded from attempted tackles, which should show some reds in there. But the first thing I think most people will notice is obviously the large chunky greens coming from Courtney House. Now, that is mostly from his duels, and I think this is something to point out as a good option at central centre-back. Something that came up, I think, was very prevalent to me is that the central centre-back, Chris Mepham, against Real Sociedad, was required to chase the striker when we were instigating a high press, and needs to be good at his aerial duels in order to win the majority of those and keep the pressure off us and make sure we get as many good counter-pressing opportunities as we can. So that's something I think, as much as it's very surface level, is a big thing to point out. The other thing I'd look at is Sepp van den Berg has the highest percentage of tackles per 90, tackles made per 90, and interceptions. Now, obviously, he didn't have the highest ground duel success, but his high interception numbers maybe states at something, shows his game intelligence, his willingness to step out, but also his comfort in stepping out of defence, because he knows he has the right wing back next to him, or the other centre back that will be the central centre back that should be able to cover for him if he is being in that. There are risks that come in attempting to make those kinds of interceptions, but I think it's a calculated risk when you are setting up with a back 5 in a large number of situations. Axel comes out as the best tackler one-on-one on the ground. He had the highest ground duel success rate, actually by quite a distance, and produced the fewest fouls when attempting to make ground tackles. So that's quite a significant plus to come for Axel Tuanzebe in here. When you're looking at the Bournemouth boys, you do need to consider that Bournemouth had the highest percentage of possession from each of these teams. Bournemouth had about 57% last season. Villa were at about 54 in their season, and Preston were just under 50% last season. So they are more likely to not have to produce as many tackles, but Their aerial duel success is very comparable to Courtney House's, very high up there, which is good to see. But ground duel success, not as high. And that's percentages, that's not numbers. So they were required to do less, but they weren't as successful as Axel. So there are pros and cons and balances to these things. Certainly at the moment, Courtney does show up quite well, as does Sepp, but you can't really ignore Axel in this situation. Now, as I mentioned, the other thing that I think we need to be looking at when we're going on to the passing stats in a second is that certainly playing with wingbacks, you need to exploit that system. You need to be playing the ball long to your wingbacks, initiating those switches of play more frequently than we did in the games that I've seen so far, because most teams are going to defend narrow against us when we chock up the middle of the pitch so much with 3 centre backs, 2 central midfielders, and even our wide players are going to come quite narrow to support Solanke. So in terms of long passing, what again comes out is actually Nat Phillips as the strongest long passer in terms of accuracy, with Lloyd Kelly being quite high up there. The difficulty is with this is that you see how much green Lloyd Kelly comes up with, and that's purely because we had the most ball in this situation comparing the other defenders. So it's difficult to have a look at the options that we're going for whilst also keeping Lloyd Kelly up with his outstanding stats in terms of passing. So I'm just going to remove Lloyd Kelly for just this instance, and showing that up brings Phillips right back to the top of the stats, because again, he was part of the Bournemouth team that dominated the ball and were very comfortable playing forward, sideways, playing in the opposition half, and his long pass accuracy was even higher than Kelly. So let's take out Phillips as well for this instance and try and get a more balanced view between the three. So in this instance, I think unsurprisingly, again, as a back playing in a back three with being given a little bit more license to push on, I feel Vandenberg shows up well in terms of his passes in opposition half and just generally in forward passes. Courtney is only 0.1 behind though, so it's quite close. Chances created, again, as someone that's been willing to go forward, is just barely higher. And his long pass accuracy, which is the thing that I did point out that I think is probably going to be the most important in terms of what we're going to be looking at in terms of the little cream on the cherry on top, as it were, for our centre backs passing accuracy. Just a small note, as I was looking through these before, Courtney does actually improve his long pass accuracy in the games that he's been in the Premier League. I am shifting my terms a little bit here by bringing in more recent seasons for these two. And it makes it slightly different with Premier League versus Championship comparisons. But it does show that he has worked on these, and maybe it's something that he's been part of in the Villa team in the Prem that have been worked on as well. So it's a reasonable thing to just include in ideas on the analysis of this data. Axel, again, comes through as the best short passer, but does play a lot more sideways passes. And you see here, Courtney plays a lot more backwards passes. So there are pros and cons in each of them. Again, Vandenberg is probably pointing out best in terms of his ability on the ball to be the direct passer that we need to produce those longer passes. So I think overall, probably would point out Vandenberg as being a good option at that right centre-back position. And then looking back at the defensive attributes, Courtney has shown up as the jeweler, as the guy that gets most aggressive, produces the clearances, produces the blocks, produces these aerial duel successes. But you may want to look at Axel's ability on the ground as the thing that tips the balance for you. Personally, overall, I'd probably be looking at right centre-back, bringing in Sepp Vandenberg on loan. I think Liverpool are looking for a loan deal, and I think that suits us. They will want him to get some Premier League experience. And then in the middle, Axel looks like he's probably more shifting towards some other teams that he might be looking to push towards based on rumours. Possibly AC Milan, I feel, has been interested in him, is what I hear. So Courtney House may be an option that we can get permanently that doesn't cost the 12 million that Nat Phillips is apparently going to cost from Liverpool. I think, we obviously like to do business with Liverpool, but, can we necessarily afford that payment at this time when we've got money invested into the training ground? And Courtney may be a better option in terms of that aggressiveness and would be at a cheaper price, I'm sure, coming from Villa. So there's the balance that you've got to make. I've given you my thoughts. Please do look back through the video, bring up that data again. Squawk has a very useful matrix comparison, so do have a look at their website and just bring up some information if you're interested. But that'll be all from me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more Sparky Stats videos in the future. I hope to be able to bring you more content, a little bit more interesting information coming from the Premier League games in the future. But anyway, that's it for me, and I'll see you next time. Up the cherries!